All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited for you all to be joining us for our our October Brainstorm. I am Lindsay Kujawa. I am the Artistic Director of Re-Theater. Re-Theater is an online theater education and consulting company whose goal is to help educators and inspire them to use theater as a tool for community engagement and community healing. Which, I mean, right now we need so desperately in endless ways in our world. And so, especially with how much has changed, not just with COVID, but also with what we're going to be talking about today and representation, and just decolonizing our spaces and ensuring all of our communities are represented. There's so much to be navigating through. And so every month we host a brainstorming session around a specific topic that we're focusing on for the month. And obviously, as you all know, this month we are re-examining content in our month focus. And this masterclass is going to be about how do we diversify the content that we're using in our schools. A quick note for those of you that are watching this in replay, there will likely be parts of it that are not going to be recorded simply because we will have breakout sessions, and that's really jarring and awkward and has been ineffective in the past to record because it just jumps in and out. So you will see like anytime that we are fully together. For those of you that are here with us, we are going to start with some amazing information and content from Nicole Perry, who I'll introduce in a moment. And then we will move into breakout rooms probably to have you just brainstorm in smaller groups, and then we'll come back for a full brainstorm. Ideally, hopefully you'll be able to stay with us the full time, just because it helps make sure we have continuity. I know I'm somebody who is like, oh my gosh, when I go into a breakout room, I like hate talking, which doesn't seem possible. I know because I'm speaking so much right now. And so sometimes I'll dip out, but please don't do that. If you have to head out, obviously feel free. We are going to be recording all of the resources that are shared today. So you'll get that in the follow-up as well. But I'm going to stop talking now. And I would love to introduce you to Nicole Perry. She is one of the first people I got to work with at Re-Theater, and I love what she's doing with Momentum Stages. Nicole, I'm going to have you introduce yourself because I'm always so horrible at this. But if you have not had the pleasure to work with Nicole or Momentum Stage, get ready because this is going to be absolutely incredible. And she is such a wonderful expert and mentor in the areas we're going to chat about. So, hey, Nicole.
Hi, thanks so much. Yeah, honestly, working with Lindsay is part of the impetus of creating Momentum Stage. When I worked with Lindsay a few summers ago, I was teaching high school theater and really was feeling the void of what I was bringing to my students. It was, Shakespeare and Shaw and Ibsen and some Oscar Wilde, and it felt very white and very male. My students were mainly female, mainly white, some Asian students. I was teaching at a boarding school, so we did have some international students. Also in teaching at a boarding school, there's a certain economic climate that exists there that privileges the students that are there. So I desperately wanted to bring to my students different voices than they were going to be surrounded with in their day-to-day life, and started looking and working and discovered that it was really a lot of work, which was totally worth it to bring to my students those voices and experiences. But it was part of working with Lindsay and having my mind blown and open to all of the things that I could be doing in class, and then working with my students and realizing all the things that they needed from me, which was not necessarily how to put on a good show, right? That's not really what they needed. That I created Momentum originally to be a vehicle of theater for social change for young people. And we had written a grant, and we were going to put on a show last spring, and then COVID, and we didn't do that. And part of what we had really wanted was theater and dance for change. So back in the winter of 2020, we built a page on our website that used to be called Decolonize the Performing Arts Classroom. It's now called the Anti-Racist Performing Arts Classroom. And we have resources on there for both theater and dance. I've taught both. I'm currently teaching dance right now in 2 different schools. So we have resources for both in terms of both content, and then also a lot of resources on what does it mean to decolonize. And the reason we changed the name from Decolonize the Performing Arts Classroom to an anti-racist one is that decolonizing isn't actually right for everybody. And if you are on that page, there's a resource called like 10 things maybe you should say instead of decolonize, because sometimes decolonize isn't what we're doing, and that's okay. You know, sometimes we are decentering whiteness in our room. Sometimes we are simply diversifying the canon. We're not actually decolonizing the classroom because we're still assessing in the same way. The same patriarchal and hierarchical structures exist in our classroom, but we are diversifying our canon. So I think it's that languaging is important, and we felt like it was important for us to change the name considering the resources that we offer, and that everybody's at a different place in the work that they're doing. Some people are really ready to decolonize and look at classroom management and assessment and the syllabus, which is some of my favorite stuff. Like I geek out over that paperwork, but some people want to be with the stuff that I started with, which is diversifying the canon. So I would love to hear from our group, like what spot you think you're at. Are you looking at content? Are you looking at your syllabus? Are you looking at different ways to assess? Are you just here because we were here tonight? Like, how can I help you? And you can turn on your microphone or you can pop it in the chat, whatever works for you.
Well, I'm the manager and the tech director for my facility. So my support job of the drama teacher, director of our programming, and the choir teacher and the band and orchestra instructors puts me sort of in a position to be a lever in and be a sort of poke, like, let's be aware that, pick some music not written by a dead white guy with long hair. How about if we do a song from somebody else's tradition, even though your children aren't, Black or Latino or whatever, you might choose a piece of material that doesn't actually align with any of the students involved in the performance. Though we have an exceptionally diverse community here in Redmond. We run from the Microsoft children, as you stated, of great privilege, to having more students on free and reduced lunch than any other school in our district. So we run the gamut of financial social inequity, but we also have a tremendously diverse cultural community here in Redmond, which is fascinating and really super fun when the kids are given the opportunity to engage and put a piece of themselves into or onto whatever piece is occurring. But I'd like you to address for me, Nicole, if you would, how you feel about what in my time, and you can tell I'm not a rookie, we called blind casting. What do we call it now? And how do we actually...
Oh, we got stuff to say on that. Yeah. Okay, great. I can definitely talk about that. And I know Lindsay has some stuff to say about that too. Great. What else?
I would like to know where to begin with diversifying. In small town Ontario, we can't do anything. Really. Everybody's white.
Great. Okay. Great. I can talk to that. Great.
So I teach I'm teaching middle school this year, but I would normally teach first grade through eighth grade at a small independent school here in Worcester. And because it's an independent school, there is a lot of families that are privileged there. So and they tend to be white upper middle class families. And but we're a lot more diverse than we were even 10 years ago, which is great. And there's been a really strong push, both curriculum wise and admissions wise, to bring in students that identify more as students of color, which is great. And we're now at like 37%, which is the most that we've ever been. So there's a really great focus on anti-racism in the school. There's like very varying degrees of comfort level with that. In my classroom, the way that I've kind of approached things is by choosing like really contemporary pieces that don't speak really loudly to one culture or another, in order to be as inclusive as possible. So it's almost like that it doesn't matter. It could be a boy and a girl. It could be a boy and boy, those sorts of things. And my kids like it. And they don't tend to like be chomping at the bit for more dramatic sort of things. But I'd want to be able to bring in other people's perspectives in a way for them to kind of like walk in somebody else's shoes for a little while, but in a way that is respectful. And it's that movement in my head away from giving them material that it's expected to be performed, and giving them material to experience and to study that it would never be appropriate for them to perform it.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's kind of where I'm at.
Great.
Bekah or Sarah, do you have any thoughts? I don't know if you can even talk, Bekah. Okay, you can.
I know, sorry. I'm in my car. We're actually on our way to go see like a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin palooza thing. So my apologies. I have my witch hat right here. I'm very excited. There has been, I would say, a lot of work that's gone on in the last few years. I also work at a private school, a boarding school with a fairly large number of international students and a very diverse, I know it's such a stinky word now. It's not even like, it doesn't even make a lot of sense anymore. But we have a beautiful population of students, and we're working on matching the faculty and staff with what our student population represents. In terms of theater, I've always enjoyed sort of pushing the envelope a little bit and opening it up for what's the point if you're not. But find most that we have this really diverse population of students, but our theater program runs mostly in a co-curricular setting, and so after school, and the students that we have that choose to come into the program are mostly white, and they have to do something after school, and so there's options for sports and there's options for theater, but I'm trying to figure out, I don't think there's any reason why it would feel like not something that a student of color would choose to do. And we have had many students of color in the past, but it does still err on the side of mostly white. And so I'm sort of looking to continue to try to pull in more students that so that they feel comfortable enough to be there, if that's what they want to do. Obviously, I don't want to pressure anybody to do it, but I want to make sure I'm not doing a disservice and making it feel in any way that it's not a place where they could speak their voice or feel comfortable or, anything like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Great.
So I'm only an after-school program currently. So it's mostly just the kids that show up who want to, put on shows, who come to my program. And so everything we do kind of has to be working toward a production of some sort. So we don't have the opportunity to be studying texts in class and then not performing them. So I'm looking for ways to kind of incorporate, BIPOC text appropriately, where I can still use those texts, but make sure that it's not my kids playing races they shouldn't be playing and things like that. But also have it be moving toward a performance, because that's what the club is supposed to be doing. My other challenge is kind of figuring out ways to use queer text in a conservative community, because my kids identify very much with those texts and those characters. And so they want to be performing those roles, but the community as a whole would likely not support that. So trying to figure out how to use those and maybe move the community toward acceptance or understanding something. So I guess kind of figuring out how to begin with that. Those are my big goals.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I will say, and Lindsay, you can jump in here too, that again, studying something in class, I have no problem with, and I speak for myself only, giving my students something that they would not have the opportunity to perform, right? Like they can read Fences in class. We can read it, we can talk about it, we can talk about the culture that is represented, we can talk about the language that Wilson uses. We will never, ever, 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 ever perform it, right? But being able to do that in class, I think is really, really important. So if you do have the opportunity to have a class, that know that you can use so many more texts than you would get the opportunity to if you were only performing. There are people that feel that is still not appropriate. So that's something you have to decide, I think, for yourself, and also with your school community, especially with conservative communities or private schools. If you have a religious affiliation, there are certain things that must be followed. But for me, I have no problem with providing students in class a text they would never have an opportunity to perform. Color blind casting is, yes, no longer the thing we say, right? Because frankly, if we are blind to color, then we are also blinding ourselves to the systemic and systematic problems that brings. So we are color conscious is the word that we use. And there's an article that's linked on the page that Lindsay has there. Sabrina, shush. Sorry, my cat is being very naughty. There's an article linked there from the LA Times that's talking about colorblind versus color conscious casting. And that when we're conscious, that we see the color of the actor and how that affects them and their life and the roles that they're going for, but also then what it does to the story, right? Like I'll give the example of, I did Merry Wives of Windsor. We have one Black student in the cast, and she could only come to rehearsal one day a week because she had bowling, I think, and she was very committed. Like she would be there her one day a week, but she could only come. So the only role I could give her was the housekeeper. And I had to sit with that for a long time of like, what does this story say now that our one Black student is playing the housekeeper, right? What does that tell her? What does that, so I just had to sit down and have a conversation with her of like, with your conflicts, this is the role that is available. Did other people interpret it that way? I don't know. But I know that my student was fine with it. And actually the dynamics between her and the doctor were fantastic. They were wonderful together and very funny. But yeah, being aware of the systemic problems caused in your actor's life, as well as what it does to your story. So color conscious is what we say for that. Diversifying and bringing in diversity when everybody is white. Yeah, that is a real thing. It sounds like it's a real thing for lots of people in this room. It's, again, if you have a class, I think that is a great way to do it. Being able to watch content also, like especially now there's so many streaming options available to be able to watch things from other cultures or from playwrights of color, focusing voices of color. There are so many newer plays. I'm gonna put this in the chat to Lynn Streeter Childress. I'm gonna forget the name of her company because I do that. I think it's Building Better People. It's a TYA company. So if you have little-ish people, like elementary and below, she has a lot of great stuff that is written openly. Like Rachel was talking about, that the gender is open, the race is open. You know, the stories are about one kid who has a giant stuffed dog and the other kid has a giant stuffed teddy bear, and they both think the other one is dumb because they have a dog or a teddy bear, right? Like that, the conflict is about so much more than dogs and teddy bears, but it works for young people. So if you have really little people, I recommend looking at her, oops, it's Streeter, not Streeted, sorry. Looking at her things, because she has both streaming options and scripts available. And they are TYA, so they're short. They're meant for little people. If you have high school people, devising and letting them write their own stuff, right? Letting them write the issues that they're interested in talking about, letting them decide where it goes, which might also be an interesting way of doing it if you have to get to a show, but you want to tackle some of the harder topics, is devising work with your students. There can still be songs, there can still be dances. It can all be their own work. That's what you're doing right now. Yeah, devising something can be great. And I still love the classics. I love Shakespeare. I love Antigone. Antigone feels hella relevant right now. And finding ways to do those classics in a color conscious way, in a gender conscious way, or in a blatantly opposite way can also be really fun. The problem for me is when all we do are the classics, right? And we don't offer our students that there are even any other options, that there are any other important voices, right? Like we teach Shakespeare like he's the god of all theater. And like, no. Now, you should probably know who he is. We should probably address it at some point, but there's so many other people out there. And there's so many people out there doing new and interesting work. And if you haven't seen it yet, What the Constitution Means to Me is on Amazon Prime, and it completely reimagines what theater is, what theater can be, and is really a wonderful example. Wouldn't necessarily assign it as homework because it is very political, but it can be so very inspiring to see something like that as theater, right? It really is storytelling, and that's what we say all the time. Oh, stand-up comedy. It's great. Stand-up comedy unit. Yeah. Cool. Lindsay, anything you want to pop in with on any of those things? Oh yeah, New Play Exchange. New Play Exchange is the best $12 you'll spend in your whole year.
Yeah, and you sometimes can find coupons for it to like be like even cheaper.
Oh, nice. I
Yeah,
keep telling them they need a referral program. Like you get 10% off, I get 10% off. Like mine would be free. As many people as I tell them to play exchange. I think that's why they don't do it.
yeah, no, I mean, it is so great. If you haven't used New Play Exchange, I totally recommend it. I also will throw someone's name over in the chat, that if anybody is looking and you want to talk about specific shows, obviously feel free to reach out. Like you can reach out to me, reach out to Nicole. If you reach out to me and want to talk to her, I'll loop her in. I know a lot about musical theater in this sense. Like non-musical theater is not my strength necessarily. But we do have a good friend of mine is a dramaturg who specifically works in with high school and middle school age students. His name is Sean Leischer, and he does so much work around this. And like I would be happy to connect you with him, and he'll come, like you can be like, these are the things I'm looking for, and he'll send you like 12 plays. Most of them will be from New Play Exchange. So I'll put a couple other resources over here. I did want to say, I know that this is more specifically talking about race, is a lot of what we're looking at today. For those of you that are in more white communities, I also, or actually in any community, but to think like more broadly about representation on your stage, especially if you're in a more predominantly white community. There's probably underrepresented folks that are there that are white. So like thinking about like, how are you portraying mental health? Are you even talking about it? Is all of your work coming from a Christian or a Judeo point of view? And this is like thinking about like, if everything is from a Christian point of view, do you have anything that could be from an atheist or from an Islamic, like any of these other things? And then also I'm going to throw over here LGBTQIA. That is going to be one, I think, especially for high schools that are in a more prominently white community. I think that LGBTQIA representation is one that we all can work on. And I will throw over a link here in a moment with a resource that was put together with our other guest artist for the month. Cody Page held a masterclass on queer theater and how to do that in any community with any age group. If you're interested in that, just like shoot me your email and I can send that to you as well. So I think that that's like the big things. Oh, and I do just want to like throw, this is just something I think like as we're going through and like thinking about material too, is just to keep in mind that in regards to musical theater, which hopefully there's some people at least that are doing musical theater here, that the golden age of musical theater ends in 1965. So that means that every single piece of theater that we consider in the canon was written before the end of the civil rights, the gender rights, LGBTQIA. So inherently, all of that work is going to have issues that we need to confront. And I'm not an advocate for shelving everything. I think that there's a lot of great material there. And so just as we're looking at this idea of like anti-racism work, it's a lot about like calling out and calling in. And so I think that those are the last few things that I would throw out. Nicole, I'm wondering if you could just for a moment before we go and like dive deeper into those, could you explain like why it's anti-racism and why like the difference between being racist and anti-racist? Just because like your guys are using that terminology. I'm not sure if everybody knows, so just quick.
Yeah, the anti-racist word, I guess, was created by Angela Davis, who is a Black woman activist, very prominent in the 70s, 80s, and still today. And she firmly believes that it is an active role. Like you cannot simply be not racist, you have to actively be anti-racist, that it does take work and it takes action, and there are things you have to do in order to be anti-racist. So that's where the term comes from, and we felt like it was maybe a better term for the page that we have on our website, because so much of it is focused on race. And I do think that when we decolonize and when we work equitably, it ends up better for everybody, whether they are queer, whether they are women in a patriarchal system, whether they are poor in a capitalist system. When we decolonize and do better, we do better. So I think we're getting there, but so much of our page was about race that it felt like a more honest name for what that page was. And also, again, honoring where people might be as they're coming in, because I also believe that you cannot decolonize if you are not centering the voices of Indigenous people. And many of us cannot do that in the space that we're in, that we maybe don't have any. We need to reach out and actively like work on that. And that is its own issue. So trying to separate and use our language just a little more carefully.
On that note, Nicole, I don't know, do all of you do land acknowledgements, which I realize I now forgot to do at the beginning? Or have you heard of this term, land acknowledgement? Okay. Nicole, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
we do them at Momentum in our events, and Lindsay does them usually every yeah, we were so excited, we were just ready to go. But it's just taking a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. So at Momentum, whenever we start with an event, all of which have been virtual recently, right, we have a land acknowledgement that says Momentum Stage is based in the land of the Seminole and Siquesta people. The Seminole tribe is the only tribe to never sign a peace treaty with the United States federal government. We also recognize that this is a stolen land built up with stolen people. We are coming to you via technology, which has its own privileges of who can access it, and that technology was created from resources of the land. Something like that is pretty much how it goes. It's a way of us acknowledging that we are not the first people here. We are not even necessarily the right people here. I always am like, the Seminoles never signed a peace treaty, and yet my house is here. I don't know. And also that the land is for more than people's consumption. Right? And there's a resource on, again, that same page, if you are looking past the decolonize section, there's a section that says even more resources. Oh, there is a whole little section on that page, thoughts on color conscious casting and representation. I forgot about it. There are 4 articles there. But the even more resources under for educators, there's one that says a teacher's guide to native land. And there's a website called nativeland.ca. Oh, Lindsay has it here. That you type in your zip code, even though it's like a specific, is it state? I think it comes from California or Canada or something. That's what CA stands for. But you type in your zip code from anywhere and it will tell you the tribe that was originally on your land. And it's a really lovely way of reminding people that they are not the center of their own universe, which I find really important for my own self as a good reminder, because I think everything is about me, but also students of privilege, it can be really good to remind them that not everything they survey is their domain.
Yes, I threw some information over in the chat. It's just a good project like that you can have with your students. It's also interesting, like if you are on a community theater board. I know, Rita, you mentioned that you work in community theater, like doing something that can like then be on your webpage that just has that. I know that right now it's still like pretty like newish that folks are doing this, so sometimes it can be jarring. I've had some clients be like, ugh, this is so PC and all of that, which, yeah, that's true. And also like, it's like pronouns, it'll become more and more common as we do it. And so I highly recommend it because it's just like that first step. Again, if you don't have like these massive leaps that you can take. So
yeah, it's fairly easy first step. I will say that when we wrote our land acknowledgement, we wrote it. We got feedback from a couple people. One wonderful human, Tara Moses, who's an Indigenous playwright. Her work is not necessarily high school appropriate. She does have plays on New Play Exchange, but I don't think they're high school appropriate. She heard it for the first time and she was like, nope, you did it wrong. I will help you. She's also very willing to be like, no, you are wrong. And it was great to get her feedback as well. Is the other important part of a land acknowledgement is that we don't just say I am on this land, but we try to recognize like where those people are now, if they still exist. For many people, like the Seminole tribe actually is still here in Florida and runs a lot of things, right? That tribe still exists and is an active part of my community, and there's no reason that I don't have better connections with that. So the land acknowledgement is really only a first step to go past acknowledging. Rachel gives the text number. Yeah, you can text that because their website goes down sometimes. Like on Indigenous Peoples Day, that website crashed because everybody was on it. Crashed hard. So it's great that they have a text number. Yeah.
Should we open it up to like more specific questions and stuff?
Yeah, I feel like we've kind of gotten everything that people brought out the first time. So let's go around again.
Yeah, I thought that was like a really good, like, here's the base. And so like based on the information Nicole shared, if anybody has like specific examples that you want to chat about or like dive into anything, and this would be a great time. I mean, since we're all working in this industry, I'm sure we've all encounter different things. So this is with the brainstorms, it's not so much of like there's one person that knows all the things, although Nicole knows like a million things, but like helping each other. And also Ruth and Sarah, you are both in Washington State, so I just wanted to call that out. Sarah, you're in Falls City, right? Yeah. So anyways, yeah, so what other questions do you have, or like what things did you come with today that you want to brainstorm around more specifically with the initial questions that you asked?
Well, I would love some suggestions for, one of the things that Nicole did address is that pretty much all the musicals written before 1965 are sort of like, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. That would be horribly offensive. Oh no, we can't do that one anymore. That's way too out of date, right? So give me your top 5 actually doable, appropriate for high school musicals. I've done Rent, I've done Chicago.
They're appropriate for high school.
Y'all have done so much stuff at Redmond, it's crazy.
Done You're in Town, I've done, so where do I go now? What's out there?
You're in Town was going to be my suggestion.
In there, done that.
Yeah, do those ones and then hire Lindsay to dramaturge it because she's amazing at those. And she's great with high school students. So do those ones, but hire Lindsay to come in and work on all of the horridness of it.
Oh no, they've done those, Nicole.
We've done those.
They are crazy. Like you guys have done so much stuff out at Redmond.
Yeah, but even the classic ones, right? That we all cringe over, the sexism or the racism. Like Lindsay is the musical theater expert at working through some of those issues. And that's the thing, like you can avoid it. But then we're just avoiding it. And there are lovely things to be learned from doing Shakespeare and doing classical musical theater, whether it's vocal technique or it's just the fact that it exists and is part of actually like American pop culture, that
so we do
sometimes we just need to deal with that stuff and we need to talk about it and we need to own it.
Right.
Instead of just go,
we're never going to get away with Master Harold and the Boys or any other Ethel Fugard or, where do we go? What do we do? what's on your top 5 produce this list? Because my kids will take a challenge, and my drama teacher is unafraid to say, okay, let's get a bunch of people in the room who survived the AIDS crisis, who lived in Alphabet City in New York during the time this play was written for. Let's get a couple of old lesbians to come sit and talk to us about that. Let's, we did all that, right? So we're not afraid to say, okay, let's bring in a drug counselor to talk about what it means to be addicted, what it really means. Last year we did Dog Sees God, so we're sort of unafraid, but where do we go?
Well, a classic musical that I love that I think you can actually get away with anything almost is Once Upon a Mattress. I don't feel like it gets done enough, and there's very little in there that is about race at all. There is this whole lovely idea of the land being more important than possessions, and the issue that I have with it is that the king is super lecherous, right? But you can totally talk about that right now, and make that work. I think that one doesn't get done enough and has so much opportunity, because the story is not about anything. So that is one I always recommend. Billy Elliot, I know it might be a little, if you have high school kids, but if you can get some little kids involved or something, that Billy Elliot is a great story about defying gender norms, and the music's fantastic. The story is good. It's bawdy enough for adults. Sabrina likes it. It's her favorite. It's actually one of my all-time favorites is Billy Elliot. I really enjoy that show as an audience member, as I've choreographed it. Like, I think it's a fantastic show in terms of content.
How do you start though? How do you I mean, we live in a Mennonite community. We can't say shit. We can't do anything. Our big deal this year is doing Of Mice and Men, because it has a Black person in it. Woo.
So this is with your community theater, Rita?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you ever had like panel conversations?
We've tried.
Yeah. How's that gone?
Not very well.
Not very well.
Nobody turned up.
Oh.
All white people.
All white people. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's okay. Those are the people that might need to hear it, might need to be there. So you're asking in terms of getting more diverse people present,
And
like to audition, to be in shows.
Yes, and more diverse theater too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we do all, we do classic theater, we do comedy, we do Canadian comedy a lot, and that's about it.
This
I work with a
Of
company
Mice
in the
and
Turks and
Men
Caicos
that
Islands. That obviously
I'm sorry, I cut you off. Can you say that again?
the company I work with in the Turks and Caicos is obviously more diverse. But even there, we blind cast. I mean, really, we have Black people playing white people playing Black people. It doesn't matter.
This show that you have coming up, Of Mice and Men, is that the first time that you've had a Black actor on your stage?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I think that's great. And that is going to be I think that's going to be a good thing for your community to see that too.
Yeah.
And for
I do.
Black people in your community to see that this is a place where we can be.
We don't have Black people in our community.
Just that one.
We had to get the actor from a different community.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully that will open up conversation and open up other people's
Hopefully, yeah.
availability to that. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So did you go out and find someone? Like, you made it a point to find someone?
Yes, we did. Uh-huh.
Yeah. That is a real thing. That sometimes has to be done. If you want to tell a certain story or tell a certain story a certain way, is to
Uh-huh.
make it happen. Make it
Yeah, we
happen.
have to.
Yeah.
We have to do that where we are.
This is great, like table reads of something that is edgy, especially now with Zoom. Like the risk factor is fairly low. You don't have to turn on the heat. You don't have to pay the electricity. Ideally, people show up and right. The risk factor is actually a little lower for edgy stuff or risky stuff or unusual stuff. And you can then get actors from everywhere too, right? That you can have people from, and you can get those different voices and different faces that you want your community to see.
Right. I was going to ask Rita if you have the opportunity to bring in guest artists from other places,
Not really, no.
even via, Zoom readings or that kind of
We,
thing.
we do Zoom readings now. We do them every other week, but they're always Canadian plays. And they're predominantly white. Again. Although we have done some of those Canadian plays in the Turks as well. And there we do them with a mix of cultures, but it's still very odd for us.
I used to say, I know there's a list on the database that is 31 Canadian female playwrights you need to know. I know there's a list on that database.
Okay.
31 Black Canadian females. So
okay, great.
You can keep your Canadian flavor and start. Maybe that's it. Like give them one thing they can hold on to and take them a new place with it.
Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in the database on the collections tab. Also on that tab are a bunch of TYA stuff. There's a Latinx TYA collection, and so for those of you looking for TYA voices, there's several on there.
Awesome.
So I have a challenge that I was facing last year because I was costuming and doing makeup and hair for the high school production at my school. And for the first time in a long time, we had like a good amount of students of color, especially students with really, really dark skin. And finding makeup for them was awful. It was so hard because we live in Worcester. We don't have like a stage makeup place. We used to, but we don't anymore to be able to go and just try things. So we're basically ordering online and keeping our fingers crossed that it's going to work for them. So any suggestions beyond like
I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't have this off the top of my head, and I might not even get it right now while I type it in. There was a wonderful person who did something at the Women's Theater Festival this summer where she talked specifically about Black hair and makeup. And I just cannot remember her name. So I'm gonna look for that, but I know that there is someone who can answer this question for you.
Okay. All right.
And Ben Nye does sample student kits.
They do. They're still, I mean, they're like $20 a piece. So we try to
check in with Production Advantage where they're like 12 or $13 a piece.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, they're in Vermont, so even closer to you. And yeah, they ship everywhere.
You said Production Advantage?
Yes.
Yeah, I ended up just putting down some dough and just ordering a whole big bunch. And still it was, I mean, because we're not super skilled with the stage makeup. So it was even just like finding different ones to blend. It takes a lot of trial and error to get the right skin tone, which is so incredibly frustrating. And my students of color were like, yeah, I see this and this sucks. And I'm like, yes, this does suck. We did succeed in getting the wireless mics in multi-skin colors. So
great.
So they came with all cream skin ones and then they got more, which is good. Step in the right direction.
Yes. Good. Yeah. I'm gonna keep looking for that, and if I don't find it, I will get it to Lindsay, who will we'll get it to all of you, because there is a person who like even does workshops on this. So I know she knows how to help you.
I have thoughts on the musical question, but I want to make sure that other people have a chance to ask other questions before we can go back to that. If you want to keep talking about that, anyone.
Yeah, I want to hear yours.
Sarah, do you have anything you want to talk about?
No, not specifically.
Okay. Hold on, I'm getting like all the things up that I pulled. I think that like the biggest, okay, so there's a couple of shows that I think can be really great. They're not necessarily going to be like from a diversity standpoint necessarily, and I'm only saying that, Ruth, because like I know Redmond, and I kind of like know like what you guys are working with a little bit. But so I think that the biggest thing, you totally can do old shows. And I like actually highly recommend still doing Golden Age musicals, because like even though there's problematic aspects of it, you usually can get around them. And if you couldn't in the past, you certainly can now, because everybody right now is doing nothing. And so there's a lot more conversations going on around like, how do we update work, all that kind of stuff. So I think that within the next like year or two, maybe it'll take longer, 5, because, you know, nobody can move quickly. We'll see a lot more accommodations being made. One of my favorite shows, it's really risky, and I know you guys can kind of do that, is Assassins. And I think it's really interesting for high school students to have the opportunity to work through that show. It's, I mean, just the content itself is so relevant today too. I know that you all do a lot of like already like community engagement through the work that you're doing. And I think that that would be really interesting to see. I also really love How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, but not done how everybody else does it. Like, or just like, and now we're putting this on and we're just waiting for the coffee number, which always is a nightmare. But like actually going back and reading why the show was created, and like it's an entire commentary on capitalism, and like really having the kids understand the satire aspect of it. And
I
not
taught that one my last year teaching high school theater. We taught that one. We didn't do it. We taught it. It is a blast, especially my class was all girls, and they ripped up the gender part of it. It was great.
Ooh,
That was fun.
yeah, I just love that show. Even though like I never listen to it on recording because it's very boring to listen that way. The other one, oh, I also really love A Chorus Line, and they have a high school edition of it. So it takes out whatever the one song about everybody like figuring out their sexuality, which personally I
Take
can't.
that out.
Huh?
We wouldn't take that out.
Oh, okay. Well, it is taken out in the high school edition.
We did the full version.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then you're good.
Not to do the adapted versions because we missed the learning moments.
Oh, did you guys do Chorus Line already?
No, we haven't done Chorus Line, but you know, we did not do a reduced version of Rent or of Chicago.
Oh,
or...
you didn't do high school edition of Rent?
No.
Oh, I'm fascinated by this. I didn't even know that licensing wise it happened.
Oh yeah. That was not a problem.
No, it's just
for anything. What are you talking about? They don't mind.
Pay the fee. They're happy to let you do the play.
Oh, I'm so curious. Okay, that we don't need to go down that rabbit hole because that's a boring conversation that I will have with other people. So yeah, those are some of my like more easy to do ones. I know is what's her name still there? That was there for like ever teaching.
Misty Doty has retired from our program.
Okay.
And she is currently involved in other things.
Okay.
But she needed to go home and raise her kids.
Yeah.
You know, she just, you know, after 15 years, she just needed to be home with her kids. And her husband's a big well, at the time he was a Microsoft partner. Now he's a partner somewhere else. And,
Sure.
she didn't have to work, so she went home to raise her kids. And,
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
know, these are like my really boundary pushing ones that I don't honestly know. Bear Pop Opera is fantastic. And I know that was done up at Ballyhoo. So it's been done in the area, so you can do it with high school kids. And there's a new version of it that's out, and TRW works very closely with everybody. Like if you have questions about like what aspects you want to keep, or if there's things you want to change, they are so knowledgeable about this show. And I mean, Jim Hoare, I don't know if any of you have worked with him, but he's amazing from TRW. That's one I really, really like for kids. The other one that I saw really work was Cabaret, but you cannot. So my big thing always is like not sexualizing young people on stage. Like there's a difference between like having them discuss and like interact, but like never putting them in a situation where it's like, oh, like an adult is like, wow, that kid's really hot, because that's really awkward. But Cabaret can be super interesting if you really, 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 really work with the text. And really, really are careful with the staging, to use it as like an opportunity to the Holocaust. And also right now is a really interesting parallel in a lot of ways, without getting too political, of things that are happening in the world. It takes a lot. Two Ladies was the only moment where I was like, no, thank you. So that's one. The other one, I mean, I don't know, honestly, it's such a far-fetched, but Spring Awakening, you can do that show with there's so many staging options because it's so surrealist. That is my dream show to do with high school students. But there is a lot in there. I mean, safer shows would be Next to Normal, although Next to Normal has its whole other implication. I mean, if you're ready to do it, like actually doing the research and how to portray bipolar on stage accurately in a non tokenizing way. It also is a little bit of a stretch because you're asking young people to be adults in like a very adult situation that's like hard to conceptualize. Carrie, I love Carrie. I don't know if anybody else, like I am obsessed with the new version of Carrie. It's great. And there's so much to unpack in it, and it is really pushing the boundaries, but it's actually a great script. And then the other one that's like seems very strange is Bright Star. It's like so tame. However, it's actually not. I did it at a Catholic high school up in Everett just this year. We were able to perform it like once before it got shut down. The Catholic high school like had a million issues with it, which was fine. But actually there's a lot in there to unpack, especially like around like the repression of like sex with young people. It's such a nuanced story. That I'm a huge fan of it, especially if you have the students and you have the director that can handle the text. It's one of my absolute favorite high school shows. I know it's sort of
What script is that?
Bright Star. Oh, Rita, you could do Bright Star.
We could?
I think so. Bright Star.
Bright Star.
Yeah, it's all bluegrass music. So that's one of the hardest things is you have to be able to have folks that can sing and play it. The banjo is really intense in it. But it's basically this, it's like Rita, my family is like so conservative, and like my mother like still does not like the work that I do in so many ways. And she and my and my dad and I saw that in New York, like on a whim, and it's one of their absolute favorite musicals.
Awesome.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, I don't believe so. The only thing is to know like two of the characters in the show, they are like young and they do have a child.
Okay.
But it is so worth it. And like the total opposite of what I just said to Ruth, you can also spin it in entirely like Christian centric light. And I actually think like from like, if you're looking at like appeasing like that part of the world, it's actually like the greatest like forgiveness story of like redemption and like what the Bible actually teaches in like a Christian standpoint. So huge fan, cannot say enough things about it, but I will
Great,
stop
thank you.
now. So I don't know, but Ruth, I'm also always happy, or anybody on this call, like if you ever want to, I'm going to throw my scheduler over there and then like stop talking. I love talking about this and like learning more about your community and what you're trying to do. And then talking through and coming up with like show ideas and like community engagement through them, because that's how you can get away with way more.
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
You know, after we did rent for the entire rest of the learning year, the kids continued to do benefits for PFLAG and, you know, several other organizations. They just kept raising funds because they just couldn't let go of what an experience it had been to, you know, get themselves involved in their community and do some service along with the show. And so it was awesome. It was really awesome.
Oh, sorry. Another one, as you were saying that, I don't know why I missed it. I'm a really big fan of Pippin, because Pippin you can do in so many different ways. I don't know if you've already done that one.
Well, a long time ago. We could easily get away with doing it again. We're past the sibling rotation, you know? So
I saw a really interesting production actually at Village Kids Stage. I think that's where it was like a while ago. And they did an entire mental health spin on it, which I mean is not really a spin, like that's what it's about, even though they couldn't write it correct. Like we didn't know concept musicals yet. But they did it, and like at the end the main player, or player one or whatever their name is, like hands Pippin a gun, and the entire stage went empty. So it was like the total different, and they have like the different interpretations of the ending and stuff. If you're looking to get edgy, you can get really edgy with Pippin. Or not. Again, you can make Pippin very easy. I don't know, Rita, if your community would be ready for Pippin yet, but that's one that at some point, it's not too far-fetched down the road. So anyways, now for real stop.
And now I want to go back to shows that older kids can do for younger kids.
Yeah, I think a lot of the TYA stuff can be done that way. Like if it's meant for an audience of young children, older kids can handle it, right? Like it's one, convincing them that they should, because sometimes they're too cool for that. Another thing that I like doing, like I had my middle schoolers a few years ago do this for first graders, is that we did like a fairy tales fables unit, but then we found all of the versions of Cinderella from other cultures, right? And we created a show like that it was all Cinderella, but it was all different versions of Cinderella. So you can play with that, because so many of those stories are cross-cultural, and you could pick one and focus on it, or you could put together like a mash of them. There's something on New Play Exchange, I'm going to forget the playwright's name, but it's like a fractured fairy tales thing where it's characters from some fairy tales in other fairy tales, and that's also very fun. And the humor of that is like what I call Shrek humor, that like adults think it's funny but kids think it's fun, you know. Like there's both of that, and like that for me is the test of a good TYA play. It's like, can I sit through this and enjoy it, right? Like if it makes me cringe, then it's kid-ish instead of fun for kids, right? So I think looking for things like that. But I've had good success with my middle schoolers, and middle schoolers hate everything, performing for little kids, doing the fairy tales and fables cross-cultural stuff.
We were thinking about like Schoolhouse Rock would be so much fun to tour to give our older kids the experience of throwing rehearsal blocks into a van and driving 3 blocks to the elementary school and putting on a show from scratch, you know, in an empty gym or a non-performance venue, turning it into a performance venue. We thought that there could be a lot of value in that, and a lot of learning in that. and I'm not sure that speaks to our diversity issue, but in terms of spreading out the kinds of things that we can teach.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of TYA stuff, like that example I gave of Lynn's piece, that it's written more openly because they do tour it, right? And they want to be able to represent students. So I know the one piece, because I've worked on this piece with her, it's the Chuck and Ann piece where there's a giant stuffed dog and a giant stuffed teddy bear, right? There's those two characters and a narrator, and they'll switch it out based on like where they're going. You know, that she has enough people in her company that she can call, that if they're going on tour to a mainly Black school, she can get the right representation. And the script allows for that. The script doesn't have, you know, it's not that it doesn't have any concern with that. That's not what the story is about. The story addresses it without being about it.
What is TYA?
Theater for Young Audiences.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've been throwing that around. So yeah, Theater for Young Audiences.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's some really good stuff. There's also really like cringy stuff. Like it has to pass the Shrek test for me. I did put some links over here. Bridging the Gap was the one that I was thinking of, but Destiny Steele also does Black hair and makeup for theater, and she has like blogs and workshops and kits. And another point about that is that you still have to talk to the lighting designer because the lights are not the same, and that might be problematic in your space, right? If you don't have a lot of options, if you have old fixed lights that you've got to gel instead of smart LEDs or something, like it might not be something you can do anything about. But if you are able to get the right lighting, that's a separate factor on that, and looking at what that looks like on stage and being aware to look for that on stage.
So the director of the High School Musicals is also the lighting designer. So is there a resource that I can send him to be thinking about lighting different skin tones?
Yep.
To Ruth.
Let me find it. But
I already want him to talk to you, Lindsay, about like outside of the box High School Musicals. So because we struggle because we have such a small population. So we struggle with getting small cast musicals that are, people know the names of it, so they're willing to audition for it and buy tickets for it, but also are within the limitations of sometimes we've got great singers, sometimes we've got great dancers that can't sing. You know, it depends on the mix of the years. So
Edges.
I was just gonna say, oh yeah, you guys did that.
Aww.
Edges is wonderful. So is I mean, it's tough that is like such a ramification of like not having a lot of folks to work with and trying to also do name recognition. If you want to do song cycles, lots of good song cycles, which kind of is Edges. Songs for a New World is really beautiful, and they've redone like orchestrations. Working, I don't know if you've done that show.
No, I don't think so.
Working, yeah, and Working is great because Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote a couple of new songs for it, so like you can have that as like a musical that has some Lin-Manuel Miranda songs. I think he just wrote one. But yeah, I'm happy to think about that more. There's a lot out there. It's just a lot of them aren't going to be known.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that we have to get beyond that name recognition issue. And we're going to have to get beyond that at one point because our population isn't necessarily growing. So yeah. Speaking of Lynn, for kids to watch, 21 Chump Street.
Yes. Which
That's
also
really
is available for rights.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
That is really
cool. Let me, now that I've said straight, I thought so.
Because that made for some really awesome conversations with my 6th and 7th graders.
Yeah, Concord.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. That one, yeah, so it's available. shoot, oh, there was another one just like came. Oh, I was gonna say, I mean, Rachel, like totally, we can talk about that. That's something that like we work a lot on as like program development. But if you don't know Jason Goldstein from BookTix, I don't know if you use BookTix, but BookTix like is a ticketing agency, but also super passionate about growing programs so that you are not relying on name recognition. And he's
Alright,
like,
yeah, actually, I think we actually use them.
oh my gosh, then you should totally reach out to Jason. He's so great at it. Like, that's why I love BookTix, is like they sell tickets, but their passion actually is in program development so that you don't have to rely on name recognition, because that's exhausting and so like tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I put 3 links in there, Rachel, for you about lighting skin tones, different skin tones. The first one's like a blog post. The second one's a YouTube video that's really short, and it's a Black woman, and she goes through like, this is what my skin looks like. And the last one is some master classes from one of the lighting companies. I don't know if you need to be like a member or not, but I know that they have them. I'm not sure if you can access them or not. USIT, the theater technology organization, I know they have some too, but I think you have to be a member to get theirs. And Rita, I popped a blog post in there for you too that we linked to on our page that might be useful for you.
Cool.
Any other questions?
I saw that, Lindsay. Thank you.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah, I threw my scheduling link over there if anybody wants to talk about shows. I know we deviated a little bit from maybe what we were going to chat about.
Speaking of deviating, I'm going to, because Lindsay brought up like the playing bipolar well and not tokenizing. That has been like my latest annoyance now is characters who are disabled being played by able-bodied humans, and that doesn't really work for me, or characters even who are like on the autism spectrum being played by people who are not on the spectrum. And I think this is a conversation that I've had. Joanna Maynard Edwards, who runs the Women's Theater Festival, is very, very passionate about this. And so we've had these conversations that if you don't have a child in a wheelchair, like don't put a child in a wheelchair, right? Maybe you don't have a child in a wheelchair, but maybe you can have another child who is disabled in a different way, right? A blind child, a deaf child, something that the representation then is not equal, but you're giving opportunities that were meant to be given, right? And I think it's the same thing, you know, for someone who is on the spectrum. Like if you don't have someone who is severely there, but you have someone who is like, those are maybe more equitable choices that we can be making, instead of thinking, oh, it will be good for the child to experience it this way. It will also be good for the child to see that people get opportunities. So that's sort of my latest thing that I'm working on and working through.
I just threw a link. It's a couple years old now. For 2017, so it's pretty old now. But there's a episode right when all of this conversation about representation came out, or was really starting to come into like the consciousness. Two of my favorite like pop culture podcasters did an episode about this, and it's really interesting. They are not experts in this field; they're just like pop culture analysts. And it's fascinating to listen to. It still holds weight, and where it doesn't, it's like we know enough and we've had enough conversations now that we're able to like critically think about it on our own. And they do end up talking. It talks a lot about race, but like kind of what Nicole was just talking about, like then going into like ability and sexuality, like all of these things. And the title of the episode is "Where's the Line," which is fascinating.
I think the line is different for different inabilities as well.
Right, Rita? Yeah.
Because my brother is deaf, And there are lots of things that he simply will not do because he says, no, people don't accept it and he won't do it. So it's very interesting because each disability has its own line.
Well, and each person too. I mean, that's what I always, when I'm working with educators on a lot of this, it's like, you like in this whole like idea of being culturally responsive, it's like decentralizing yourself as the educator and the expert, and into the mentor and guide role. And that means that the relationship between you and your student is symbiotic. And so like if a student comes to you and says something is offensive, like you can't be like, no, you're being whatever. Like if it's a person from that like race, ethnicity, gender, ability, like you don't get to say, no, I'm older than you and I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets tricky with white students, how that works if like they aren't from that oppressed group of folks, but super interesting to think about.
Well,
Yes.
Nicole, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, how is it different for your need to have a wheelchair-bound person play a wheelchair-bound character versus a lesbian play a lesbian, or a black person play a black person, or an Indian person play an Indian person?
Yeah, I think those things should be true until we get to a place where representation is much more equitable, because those people have less opportunities to be represented as a whole person. And it's still unfortunate that very often when a wheelchair bound character, right, when a character's in a wheelchair, their story is very often about them being in a wheelchair, right? So it's also great if we could put a character in a wheelchair in a storyline where they're not, where it's not about that. But if they have the opportunity, right? And if you have the opportunity to cast a disabled student in a disabled role, or you have the opportunity to cast an abled student in a disabled role, it should go to the disabled student because they have less opportunity for representation.
I agree.
There's a lot of fun Twitter things you can get into today, like literally today, because the prom trailer just came out. And people are very like polarized about James Corden playing. Of course, I cannot remember the character's name, but he's a straight man playing a character who's very flamboyant and gay, and it turning into a caricature, which the show is like very like body as it is. And so yeah, or broad humor, not body. So there's so many great conversations, and I think right now we have to all be talking to each other.
Yeah. I'm giving you one more link. This is Token Theater Friends, which is a super great podcast. I know Jose was on with Lindsay a while ago. Deep Tran is the other voice in Token Theater Friends, and she and I have known each other for a few years now. And so they are voices of color theater critics in New York. They see everything, they geek out about everything, but from a very particular perspective, which is wonderful. And now they have created like not just the podcast, but they have a blog going now, and they're writing about a lot of stuff, and they're both wonderful humans, and it's a wonderful service they are doing for us to share their opinions on these things.
So I know we're almost out of time, but I just thought of something. Suggestions for plays that can be done virtually.
Ooh. Always check with, like, if you have a first choice, always check with your licensing company, because they might go for it. But there
But
is
it's also the adapting things to be able to work virtually sort of experience. Not everything translates very well at all.
Yeah, there's a collection of come on, Nicole. Goodwin. What's his name? He's just redone all of his stuff. I have them somewhere. I will find them. I will find them for you. Idris Goodwin has just redone his with TYA USA to be virtual ones. Don Zolaitis, who is a white male but very prolific playwright for teens, has also redone a bunch of his to be virtual, like to work virtually. Here's the Idris Goodwin ones that I was looking for. And there's also another company that is doing a bunch of like rewrites, and I will see if I can find those for you, because nope, that's the same thing. Hang on, let me get this link.
Everybody's doing She Kills Monsters around here.
Of course. Well, it's awesome. I can't blame them.
It is awesome. Yeah, and it translates pretty well. So we're teaching.
There's that one, and let me find this other one. I don't have Don Zolaitis on here because he is a white man, and that's not what this list is for. But
I just threw in there 26 Pebbles. It's like a 6-person cast. It's somewhat docu-theater, like Anne Devere Smith style. It's about the Heartland Elementary School shooting. It's really intense. You really got to make sure that you're doing enough like emotional support work for your students to do it, but it's fantastic. And I think there's a lot of other, I would say docu-theater, or like in that realm work, ethno-theater is so great for online. And you could even do that yourself, like have your students create their own. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the Verbatim Performance Lab at NYU. I'll throw it over here. Joe Salvatore does some stuff with us, and they are doing online residencies right now with schools to help them create their own like work that's in response to the pandemic. They also just released a new, I think it's all out now. They did a new show about the pandemic that they recorded all the work early on. It's fascinating.
Cool.
Actually, yeah, I'll throw it over here. I mean, Sarah's heard me literally talk about this 400,000 times. But their work is so cool, and also highly recommend having your students check it out, because their work is like where they take a piece of like actual like documentary like performance, and they switch the gender and the race of the characters, and you watch it in multiple ways. Their big thing was they were off Broadway for, of course, I can't remember it. They in 2016 they took 10 minutes from each of the Clinton Trump debates, and they switched. So a woman read Trump and a man read Hillary, and they do research on all of their work. So it's fascinating. And what they assumed their findings would be was that when Hillary was read by a man, that people would find that person to like be more intelligent or like the superior person. But actually what they found was not the case at all. Fascinating work. They also have one about Serena Williams when she was expelled from the game. They do like the 5-minute piece, and they do it with a white woman, a black man, and a white man. And it is like, it like goes, whoa, gosh, like all of my biases are so staring me in the face. So I'm gonna put
really
this.
Good stuff.
It's so great, and it's education based. So the lab is a part of the master's program at Steinhardt, and so honestly, check them out. And like their online residencies are incredible. So now I will stop.
Well, that just might be great stuff just for my fellow educators as we're on our anti-racism journey. So.
Oh, please. Yeah. All of their performances are on here. If you ever want to, like, if you check it out and you want to connect with Joe, like, please reach out. He is one of my favorite educator humans ever. And he can talk to you about the whole way that they put it together.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other last thoughts? Okay, well, that's great because we're out of time. I just want to say thank you so much, Nicole. This was so great. I talked way more than I normally do in these, so sorry that was tapping on you at all. But anybody who's watching this in replay, please feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts, if you have any resources that you want to share. We will be putting together a webpage specifically for this brainstorm with all the different resources that were shared
There's
today.
so many.
So many that y'all can come back and check out. But
Is there a
Nicole,
way
again,
to print this chat or
What?
save it? Is there a way to print this chat or save it?
really good
I think
question.
you go to the 3 dots.
Oh yeah, save chat.
Mhm.
Does it give you that option?
Or just us because we're hosts.
Oh, it does. Okay. So yeah, you can see the chat that way. But Nicole, thank you so much again for all of your work. Please check out Momentum Stage. They do such amazing conversations and classes, and just totally support and love all the work they're doing.
And
So
those
next month,
databases are living documents, so they're updated regularly. But if you're looking at the database and you were like, my favorite BIPOC playwright is not on here, please send me an email and I will update it because we are always working on them, like literally always.
awesome. Well, yeah.
Thank
So
you,
Nicole, are there any
Nicole.
last things you want to throw out before we go?
No, I think that's it. We have a conversation series coming in January. Lindsay and I were just talking about this. So if you are over on our website and you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get information about that. We do conversations around creating change in the performing arts, and we did a series of 4 over the summer, and we get artists and educators to talk about. We mainly focused on race over the summer, and then we are spreading that out to talk about gender, queer identity, and ability issues in our next sessions.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well,
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And we hope to see you next month.
You will.
All right, everyone. Bye.
All right,
Bye.
friends. Goodbye.